The Department of Child Protective Services has become a protected empire built on taking children and separating families. That caseworkers and social workers are very often guilty of fraud. They withhold and destroy evidence. They fabricate evidence, and they seek to terminate parental rights unnecessarily. That the separation of families and the snatching of children is growing as the business grows because state and local governments have grown accustomed to having these taxpayer dollars to balance their ever-growing budgets. My report is concerned with the children and parents caught up in legal kidnapping.
Save the baby, save the kids. Have the baby, let it grow, just let it live. Save the baby,
we bring social workers into homes of parents to help them deal with how to raise their children.
And then it appears the Department of Child Safety has lost them.
Don't want the same thing for your seed. How you go and take that life and be back out here on your knees? What if your mama aborted you? How that statement make you feel? You tell me.
When in the last few months, I've done a series of investigations into CPS. Until now, CPS told me they had no comment, but now they are giving us access.
2 Child Protective Service workers are facing charges in the murder of a 3-year-old Detroit boy. Today, it was the state manager's turn to take the stand.
But to me, these numbers seem very alarming. The latest numbers show that in April 2020, the Arizona Department of Child Safety listed 229 runaways and 42 missing children. That totals 271 children that have been taken by the Arizona Department of Child Safety.
Save the baby, save the baby, save the kids. Have the baby, let it grow, just let it live. Save the baby, save the baby, save the kids.
The American Child Protective Services system is in crisis. Parents say that their children were seized by CPS agents who broke into their houses and funneled their children into underground sex slavery.
The story of the battle between a mother and Child Protective Services.
Every person that I spoke to today had a heartbreaking story of how they.
Today, a protest outside the Harris County Child Protective Services office.
Further testament to just how many lives have been touched by this little girl.
This is Judge Lois Haight, Rebecca Hardy, and Jill Fannin, the 3 judges that we're here protesting against. These judges are taking children away from their parents. They're allowing perjury in the courtrooms. They've been found guilty of doing this numerous times.
Andrea Wood is the president of the activist group California Family Advocacy.
The counties need the money. I have records of the Contra Costa County saying that they're broke, they're in financial stress, they need money along those lines. And they need to take these children away. So they're actually trying to make false allegations against parents. They're trying to force children under what's called suborned perjury to lie against their parents. It's a criminal racket. It really is. And the courts also then make money on the services that they provide. If they can get the parent to take a parenting class or something of that nature, they get a percentage back of that as well. But the big racket is putting children in foster cares, group homes, and adopting children out. My son, who was taken for a period of time, is now back, was put in a group home where the young children there were offered up to adults for sex, minor children, to adults that wanted to either, come to the property or meet them elsewhere, I guess. And these were, young children. And this is what happens in group homes. They're trafficked to pedophiles. And this is the practice, because selling a child over and over again is just such a lucrative business.
For this documentary, I have obtained a death certificate for a baby girl named Desiree Ramirez in Contra Costa County, California. She died on October 27th, 2018 at the age of 4 months old. She was in CPS custody at the time of her death, living in a foster home. Her social worker, Tasha Mizell, is listed on her death certificate. Her parents sued Contra Costa County, and the lawsuit states the following, quote, "The autopsy revealed that DR, the child, had internal bleeding in her abdominal cavity and bruises to her internal organs and on the back of her head. The coroner listed the cause of death was caused by the heart stop beating or by an abnormal heart rhythm. The latter could not have been a cause because there was no EKG. The child was already dead when emergency personnel arrived at the scene. So think about this. How does a young baby, 4 months old, suffer internal bleeding in her abdominal cavity and bruises to her internal organs and on the back of her head? So with all these questions that are circling around about this girl's death, and I'm revealing this here to the world today, you know what CPS did? They had Desiree Ramirez's body cremated.
CPS took Andrea's children away from her as a part of a plot involving her vindictive neighbor, who became the foster parent of her daughter. Andrea's story echoes the stories of parents around America who say that CPS kidnapped their children and subjected them to pedophilia, drugging, and even death. The social worker who has supervised Andrea's daughter, Acacia Chidi, has a criminal record and numerous aliases. Broward Sheriff's Office records show that Acacia Hasina Chidi has been known by other names, including Shindana Monique Bell, Shindana Monique Thomas, Acacia Chadi, Donna Monique Thomas, and Corey Bell. On May 27th, 2007, Acacia Chidi got arrested and she was charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, disorderly conduct, breach of the peace, resist officer obstruct without violence, and criminal mischief. She assaulted an officer with a deadly weapon in an airport. She has more than one charge on her record. According to sheriff's records, Acacia Chidi has a tattoo on her right thigh that says, "She Devil." Confronted with evidence of her criminal past and use of aliases, Acacia Chidi threatened Andrea Wood in a text message.
If you address me by any other name other than Acacia Chidi, I take that as a threat, verbal abuse, to be inappropriate, to be threatening, and an attempt on your part to intimidate me and children and family services. I have informed you in my previous text of the consequences should you threaten me or call me outside of my legal name. It is your choice to do so or not. Should you choose to do so, the actions stated will be taken.
CPS is well known for hiring criminals. In 2009, the Sacramento Bee identified at least 68 Sacramento County, California CPS workers who had criminal records in that county, but who nevertheless worked with vulnerable minors, oftentimes alone. Social Security money is paying for CPS agents to human traffic kids, courtesy of a law signed by Bill Clinton in 1997 that pays your retirement money to states every time a child is taken from their biological family and adopted out of foster care. Hillary Clinton spearheaded the passage of the Adoption and Safe Families Act as part of her "It Takes a Village" philosophy of collectivist child raising.
Yes, it takes a village.
In 1977, Hillary Clinton's mentor, Mary Jo Bain, reportedly said,
In order to raise children with equality, we must take them away from families and communally raise them.
Mary Jo Bain later served in the Bill Clinton administration's Health and Human Services Department, leading the Children and Families Division during the welfare reform push during the period in which Hillary Clinton crafted the Adoption and Safe Families Act. Under the law, states receive Title IV incentive payments from Social Security, originally totaling $4,000 for foster children who get adopted and $6,000 for special needs children who get adopted. Parents automatically lose their custodial rights if a child spends 15 out of 22 months in foster care. Hillary Clinton called it her proudest work, and she bragged about increasing foster adoptions by 64% in the foreword to the 2006 re-release of her book, It Takes a Village.
Today's story is a beautiful tale about a community coming together to make a village. Today's themes are kindness, unity, and cooperation.
I'm going to start with the fact that we have a prophet going to remove children. ASFA, which is the American Safe Families Act, under Title 4D, funds these agencies, subcontractors of DCF, to the tune of about $150,000 a year per child, as long as they are not placed with their families.
If the biological family gets a child back, then the states don't get the money to keep the human trafficking business afloat. Therefore, the state courts have an incentive to detain the children in order to make money. It is a for-profit business known as Kids for Cash. According to Congress's numbers, by April 2018, the federal government had already sent $613.9 million in Social Security money to states in the form of ASFA incentive payments. Ever notice how Social Security is bankrupt now? The government is using your retirement money to traffic children. Undeterred, Andrea is putting herself through law school and has mounted a case against the state of California's Department of Social Services and Contra Costa County, aiming to reform the system. The lawyer representing Andrea in her case, Mark Angelucci, was recently murdered by a man who dressed up as a FedEx delivery man.
Well, detectives have released photos of a suspect connected to an attorney's murder in San Bernardino County and the murder of a judge's son in New Jersey.
Detectives say Mark Angelucci was shot and killed outside of his Crestline home on July 11th by a man in a FedEx uniform. Detectives released photos of Den Hollander at the San Bernardino train station. They say he rented a car and drove to Angelucci's house where he shot and killed him. They also released a photo of Hollander after he took a train to Union Station in L.A. Hollander killed himself after posing as a delivery driver at the home of a judge in New Jersey. Her son was shot and killed. Her husband was seriously injured.
I also wanted to share that my attorney was Mark Angelucci. And Mark Angelucci was very against child trafficking and criminal behaving judges. He went after a judge and won. I believe that was in Louisiana. And then he decided to work with me to take on the child trafficking dilemma.
Mark Angelucci's murder echoes the mysterious deaths of pro-child advocates Senator Linda Collins Smith of Arkansas, Senator Nancy Schaefer of Georgia, Senator Jonathan Nichols of Oklahoma, and Monica Peterson. Journalists Isaac Cappy, Andrew Breitbart, and Martin Burns. Linda Collins Smith, an Arkansas state senator who led a charge to save the children, was murdered in 2019. At the time, Smith was working with the Department of Homeland Security to investigate $27 million in missing CPS funds. As speculation about her death swirled, a judge issued a gag order to conceal investigative documents on the death of Linda Collins Smith. The late Georgia State Senator Nancy Schaefer was a pioneer in the CPS reform movement. In 2007, she authored a report called The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services.
It's a privilege for me to join you tonight and to be with you in some pro-family policy here. I will share with you on the unlimited power of Child Protective Services. I served in the Georgia State Senate, and after 4 years of viewing the ruthless and unsparing actions of Child Protective Services, also called CPS, which I will use tonight, I wrote a scathing report entitled The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services. Thank you. The report cost me my Senate seat.
In 2010, she was murdered with a gunshot wound to the back, while her husband died from a gunshot wound to the chest. State Senator Jonathan Nichols of Oklahoma led an effort and introduced a bill to punish child sex predators with the death penalty. In 2019, he was shot to death in another questionable quote-unquote suicide. Martin Burns, an investigative journalist who created the Children Lost in the System series to expose the child predator networks, died in a so-called hiking accident in 2013. Shortly before his death, Burns reportedly said, "Nobody can silence me." Then State Senator David Farnsworth launched an effort to try to find out where the missing children from the Arizona Department of Child Safety have gone, and he got threatened for it.
Hello, this is State Senator David Farnsworth. I was having a peaceful Sunday afternoon with my wife until someone sent me a link to the Channel 15 report on missing children. We need to all be concerned. If DCS can't keep track of their children, they need to stop taking them out of the home. Now, some of you may think that's horrible, but I'll remind you that only 20% of the children that Arizona Department of Child Safety removes from homes are removed from homes because of abuse. The other 80% are removed because of neglect. Now, we'll all agree that neglecting children is a terrible thing, but who's to judge what neglect is? And I will say again, if DCS cannot keep track of the children that are in their charge, they should leave them in their parents' homes.
Journalist Andrew Breitbart died in 2012. In 2011, he famously tweeted, "How Prague guru John Podesta isn't household name as world-class underage sex slave op cover-upper defending unspeakable dregs escapes me. What are they so desperate to cover up?"
This is a concerted effort. This is a concerted effort. Politics of personal destruction. Fuck you, John Podesta.
All right, well, you see where I'm coming from.
Okay, yeah.
When I talk, that's because I'm interested in this ongoing, whatever the hell they're doing.
What's in your closet, John Podesta? Big Podesta? Big Soros? Do you want us to play these games? Because we're playing to win.
CPS workers have been caught on tape working with the police to bust into families' homes in search of children.
Police Department. Hello, Anna. May I have you come with us?
Yes. You want to take away my baby? You want to take away my baby? I want to make sure that he's safe. And he is safe. You want to go with me to the hospital? Let's go. Let's go. Well, we're going to be fine.
Come on, Anna.
Where is he going to be? I will tell you. Where is he going to be?
He's going to a hospital.
Which one? Which one?
We're not going to tell you right now because I don't think you're acting, rationally right now.
They told us that we're going to bring him to the
Anna,
hospital.
you have the Kaiser paperwork?
Yes, I do.
Let me take a look.
Many times, CPS agents medically kidnap newborn infants directly from the hospital.
Yeah, we're fine. We just want to be discharged. Can you take that security thing off so we can leave?
No, we can't.
What do you mean, no?
There's no doctor's order.
You don't have to have a doctor's order. We're refusing service.
There's no doctor's order.
We don't have to have. You're being recorded right now, so I'm just letting you know.
The mommy can go.
The baby can go too.
Cannot go with the mom.
What do you mean the baby can't go with the mom?
Yeah.
Why?
There's no order.
Then get the doctor
the
up here.
mommy can go.
Get the
with
doctor
an
up here
AMA.
so we can be discharged.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with the baby.
We're calling the doctor.
Please.
How you doing, sir? What's your name? What's your name, sir?
It's not important, man.
Okay.
My rights are being violated.
The baby doesn't leave? Okay.
What do you mean the baby doesn't
The
leave?
baby's not leaving? And we have San Bernardino PD coming up.
Well, have them come up.
Oh, they are coming up.
Good.
Okay. So you can stand by if you want, or you can leave. We can escort you out.
Why isn't the baby leaving?
Well, you don't want to talk. You don't want to tell me your name, so we're done talking. Okay? So either you can go back to the room and wait, or you can wait for San Bernardino.
They have my name.
Okay.
So you're violating my rights right now, man.
You can leave, sir.
Oh, I'm not gonna leave. I have my family here.
Oh, okay.
So where's the doctor's orders?
The movement to stop Child Protective Services is about to explode. On July 16, 2022, parents around the United States will hold a series of coordinated protests, both in person and on the internet, to tell their stories about how CPS agents kidnap their children for profit. This protest strategy aims to create a synergistic effect, making it impossible for the world to ignore. Aaron Ray, a man from Ohio, says he found his daughter being sex trafficked on Craigslist. CPS agents assert authority over parents they target. This CPS worker told a mother, "I just pop up," before CPS took her children later that day.
I don't have to call you to come to your house.
When you first initially get a case.
Correct.
You don't
just pop up.
Parents have to fight for the right to videotape interactions with CPS agents. Here, a Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services worker named Margot Sellers falsely tried to tell a family that they could not record what happened in a meeting, but the family refused to back down.
It's not policy. It's not a policy that we allow.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not allowed. Oh, I see. Well, that's not permitted. Yeah.
Well, this is being recorded. I'm sorry. I have the First Amendment to protect me, so policy or not.
A mother in Salem, Oregon, protected her daughter from CPS agents who claimed that the girl was suffering from seizures. The mother clearly knew and protected her
I need to
rights.
get your guys' name,
Sure.
information.
So I'm Sandy Springer. I work for Marion County Child Welfare. I'm a intake caseworker.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. And so what is
So we're
the
out
call?
here. Yeah, so we're out here because we got a call of concern that your oldest daughter
Mm-hmm.
suffers from seizures and does not have medical treatment. Is not.
And you're not able to tell me who is reporting
No, we
that?
do not disclose callers.
And what are you asking for today?
So what I'm just trying to get information on, does your daughter have seizures? Which you said no. And so I just need to see if get a hold of a doctor or some way that I can confirm that with.
Okay.
And you're saying that
So
your
you
daughter's
were asking for a release for me
a
to
release
sign
of
right now
information. Yeah, that'd
to
be
a
great if
doctor?
you would sign to the doctor for your daughter so I could talk to the doctor. And then since your daughter is not here, so I can't ask her,
Mhm.
about it. And that's what I'd like to do today. To complete my assessment, I am required to do what's called a comprehensive. So I would need to
Mhm.
talk to her and do and chat with her and chat with you. And not just about this one thing, but we do that full comprehensive. So we
Mhm.
talk about, we talk about mental health and drug and alcohol. We talk about discipline. We talk about
So why do you talk about all of those things when it's related to someone calling in about a medical?
So our policy is that in the Oregon safety model is that the best way for us to ensure child safety is to do that comprehensive, is to get that full picture of a family and how the family functions and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So that's our practice with the Oregon safety model.
Okay. So are you guys claiming to have jurisdiction of my daughter?
No, you have custody of
'Cause
your
I'm-
daughter. Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
living blood and flesh, and she is as well. So
Yeah, no,
she's
you
my
have
daughter.
you have absolutely you have custody jurisdiction of your daughter. We're just out. I'm out here to gather information and assess. Are your children safe?
Okay.
Specifically in regards to does your daughter?
But I already know they're safe because we had a case open, and you guys already know that.
Right, but we got this
So-
new call that hadn't been addressed.
But you already know
before.
that my children are safe. You're just concerned about a seizure. That would be the concern.
That is
today.
this. Yes, that's the concern that brings us us. But as part of our our policy and the organ safety models, we have to do that comprehensive because, and part of that is there something going on that we need to address? Like, is there another avenue or issue that we're like, oh.
I'll be right back.
Sure.
If you are looking and you want to talk to her,
right?
What all else are you wanting to do in this full assessment?
So part of the full assessment is like, so we would talk to you. I'm required to talk to legal parents, all legal parents, so dads and moms. I'm required to talk to anyone who lives in the home. That includes children and their parents. Like, I'm required to notify all legal parents, hey, I talked to your child. That kind of stuff. So it's all there.
So it's not just about talking to Alashay today and closing the assessment, like you said.
Yes,
you said I'm going to talk to everyone.
That's part
all
of the
kids.
comprehensive.
Okay. So because you just said that you were going to talk to Alashay.
Yes,
and you were
I
going
do
to
need
close
to talk
the assessment after talking to her, is what you said. I have it on video.
So I apologize if that was misinterpreted. So I do have to talk to her before closing it, but before closing it, I'm also required to do a comprehensive with everyone.
Because I dealt with this last time with people saying things and it not being recorded and it being completely different. And I'm not dealing with that this time.
I understand.
There needs to be everything up front, and it's very frustrating. Other people are calling in. I know you guys get multiple calls all the time, and they already saw in the last case, I'm a good parent, there was nothing. So it's very frustrating that someone can just call and say something.
It is,
and that you guys come in with some kind of authority, you say, to interfere with people's lives.
It's absolutely frustrating.
It's very frustrating because that's not the way that America is set up. We're supposed to have privacy. We're not supposed to have our parental rights interfered with. There should be due process.
The bottom line is
there should
our
be a
job
jury.
Is safety, child safety, and it's our job
I
to go out
understand
and
that,
assess
but
and
with
ensure it.
safety, you also need to protect the parents and the family together. That means due process rights and not to interfere in families' lives like that.
As long as children are safe, then we don't
Yes,
want to.
I understand that. I've done a lot of research on this since last time.
Yep. So
and it's right before Christmas time, so this is another thing.
Stressful.
So when did this call come in?
So the call came in, I think today. It came in today.
Okay.
So yeah, it came in today, 12:23.
You guys are pretty fast on moving, huh?
Well, the policy is that it needs to be addressed within 2 to 24 hours.
Former social worker Melinda Murphy worked in Los Angeles County and turned against the CPS system. Murphy's revelations about CPS misconduct are breathtaking.
And so I think what your audience would be most interested in what we do is that we go out and we do an independent investigation of what's happening, and we report back to the parents' attorneys. So, for example, I'm asked all the time to go observe visits.
Okay.
And I'll read the social worker report beforehand. The social worker reported to the
assessment of what's happened, what she's viewed or he's viewed,
or the HSA, where we talk about previously the
human service aides. Okay.
And I'll read that there was no bond between, for example, a teenage son and his father. The son, didn't want to visit with his father. The father has no parenting skills. Recommending terminate, reunification, everything. So then I'll go and observe the visits, and I'm telling you, 80% of the time, what I see is completely different than what's in the
what they actually report. You see a beautiful family, you see a close bond,
and not all the time, but I just do I'm just honest. I'm just going to go see what I see based on my experience, And for that example, I went out and. The father has excellent communication skills with his son. His father's very approachable. They're hugging. The son's asking if he could come live with the father, but the court doesn't get that information. The court gets only what the social worker is reporting, which is erroneous information. So that's why I love my job. When I was hired, the people who hired me said, you're not a hired gun.
You're not a hired gun.
And I said, well, finally, finally.
Exactly.
For over 20 years. And what I do is they said, just tell us the truth. Tell us what
we want the truth.
Tell us the truth. Say, do you think, tell us, do you think the parent needs some, more help with something, or do you think the social worker's on track or not on track? But like I said, 80% of the time, it's just complete mismatch.
CPS workers in Prescott, Arizona were caught wearing professional kidnapper t-shirts, rubbing it in the faces of parents who have lost their children. CPS uses a computer program called Predictive Analytics to make the case that a parent is going to mistreat their children before any abuse even occurs. Talk about a dystopian reality. An experiment in Los Angeles County found that Predictive Analytics creates false positives over 95% of the time, meaning that the Minority Report style future crime program wrongly takes kids from their parents the vast majority of the time, even though the kids are not actually at risk of being abused. In many cases, the parents are simply poor. Homeschool parents like Hemard King and Autumn King have also been targeted. Their children were seized by the state for supposed educational neglect. CPS tried to use coronavirus to snatch kids. In October 2021, Washington, D.C.'s Deputy Mayor for Education confirmed that CPS was seriously investigating approximately 30 families for educational neglect out of the at least 90 families in Washington, D.C. who had virus-related safety concerns and got reported to CPS.
Some D.C. public school parents are opting to keep their children home during the start of the school year without official approval.
And some of those parents tell the News 4 I-Team the school district has started reporting them to Child and Family Services for educational neglect.
Lindsey Graham, who kept her Salem, Oregon salon open in defiance of coronavirus tyranny, revealed that CPS went to her house and targeted her family as political retaliation.
And I've never expected such a violent, aggressive, vindictive thing could ever have been done to me or my family, because I'm trying to earn a living, because I'm trying to work.
A lawyer said that L.A. County's CPS agency tried to snatch a kid because he allegedly tested positive for coronavirus. California lawyer Christopher Arash posted during the coronavirus scamdemic.
Today in Dependency Court madness, L.A. County Department of Children and Family Services recommended that the court remove my client's child from their physical custody after the parent tested positive for COVID-19. This is a non-offending parent. The judge ruled in favor of DCFS and detained. Let that sink in. DCFS is asking for children to be removed from their parents' custody due to COVID-19 despite the parent making the appropriate arrangements for their child. To be clear, as the author of this post, I completely support taking the appropriate precautions recommended by the CDC to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
National File reported a Child Protective Services worker in Oklahoma used the coronavirus outbreak to cut off a mother and father's visits with their 20-month-old daughter, even though the Department of Human Services, the state agency that oversees CPS, claims to be keeping parental visits open. DHS statewide has suspended all visitations due to the virus, so after today's visit, we cannot approve any more visitations until it is reinstated, said CPS permanency worker Danielle Dillman in a Friday morning text message to Andrew Ritter regarding his 20-month-old daughter, who was seized by the government for failure to thrive due to low infant birth weight after the girl's mother chose to breastfeed her. The state CPS agency in Washington state got caught setting up a child quarantine center during the coronavirus, a job posting stated.
DCYF is seeking current DCYF employees in King, Snohomish, and Benton counties to volunteer to supervise and support children and youth in emergency quarantine centers. While this is a voluntary effort, you will be compensated 4 ranges, approximately 20% above your current base salary while performing these duties, and return to your normal position and salary once concluded. We are looking for current DCYF Social Service Specialist 3s to care for children who are either COVID-19 positive or who may have been exposed to COVID-19. There are 3 locations.
In response, the Washington State DCYF agency said that the quarantine centers were being planned for kids who were already in the CPS system. CPS often denies parents visitations with their children, even though attempts at family reunification are mandated. Welfares and Institutions Code 361.2 requires that parents be allowed to visit their children, but CPS operates illegally, and they extort parents for money to see their kids and for other expenses. According to military veteran Barry White, they tried to get me to pay a professional to talk to my daughter. My daughter said several times she wants to come home, but they said I couldn't record that or show anybody that. A lawyer for the Orange County Child Welfare System unsuccessfully argued before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that social workers somehow have a right to lie to seize children.
Thus far, we have not been presented with any clearly established right that tells us that what our clients did, which is remove the children pursuant to a court order.
No, but what they're accused of doing and what the issue is here is committing perjury in a court to take away someone's children. And you just said that's obviously not okay to do.
According to our moral compass and our ethical guidelines, but what we're here to decide is the constitutionality of it, and we look to the courts.
You mean due process is somehow consistent with a government official introducing perjured testimony and false? How is that consistent? I mean, I hate to get pumped up about this, but I'm just staggered by the claim that people in the shoes of your clients wouldn't be on notice that you can't use perjury and false evidence to take away somebody's children. That, to me, is mind-boggling.
The state of California officially labels all missing foster care children as runaways instead of missing children, to ensure that no Amber Alert gets issued for the foster child. California Department of Social Services official Adam Weintraub admitted,
"The California Department of Social Services receives reports from California counties via the statewide child welfare data system. There is no separate category for missing children. All children who leave the system without explanation are grouped together under the category of runaway."
Sometimes the children get sex trafficked. Sometimes the children end up living with a pedophile in foster care. Sometimes the children end up dead. In 2016, in Andrea Woods County of Contra Costa, California, a foster parent by the name of Michael Mallett engaged in a 12-hour standoff with the cops before police eventually shot and killed him. Michael Mallett was about to face 12 counts of lewd act upon a child. Family members had no idea that their children were living with a dangerous alleged pedophile. A father whose daughter was living with Mallett told journalist Patrick Halley about his nightmare.
Apparently, an 11-year-old girl who was living on the same property with my daughter, she said something. She said that she was molested for some time while being there for 4 years. She finally said something when she was 11. CPS is not willing to take any responsibility for it. I confronted CPS about it, and they said, "You should be happy you got your kids back, and if you have a problem with what we did, then get a lawyer."
The foster care system has grown to historic size during the opioid crisis, with parents losing their kids due to alleged drug use. In the foster care system, the kids are heavily drugged. A young man told his story of drugging and abuse in the foster care system in Oregon.
If I were to tell you that CPS is stealing children from perfectly loving homes, would you believe me?
Oh yes. I went through that myself. Actually, I did personally. Actually, my own. I was taken away when I was 5 years old in the state of Oregon, and well, I was in DHS for till I was 18, and then they basically dropped me off at the mission when I was 18 because I was too difficult for them, and they basically drugged me all my life. I went through 28 different foster homes. Some of them did some fucked up shit. A lot of them did fucked up shit.
The child welfare system barely monitors its own mass drugging of the kids. Foster kids are much more likely than other children to be drugged. In July 2020, at the height of racial protests, National File reported government-funded youth groups as well as foster care providers and social workers are encouraging, supporting, and in some cases organizing young people under their jurisdiction to protest against racism and the police in the aftermath of George Floyd's death.
Brenda has been cleared of all abuse allegations, but last week, when her attorney told Child Protective Services workers to stop contacting Brenda, CPS went to court demanding to see
I just really haven't wanted to let him go since I picked him up.
Jessie McCombs has good reason to hold her 4-year-old a little tighter after she said 2 imposters showed up to her home, a woman followed by a man.
Well, where did a CPS imposter get the information police say she used on fake documents in an attempt to kidnap an infant?
But they're not. They're not safe. You know, they're taken out of good, loving homes and placed in, foster care with people who don't care the same way that the parents do.
In the election year of 2020, President Donald Trump answered the concerns of parents with an executive order that did not go far enough to stop CPS abuses, but at least seemed to move the ball down the field in the right direction. Trump's executive order established a federal review process to prevent unnecessary removal of children and indicated that parents could access federal funds for their legal representation. The mainstream media largely ignored Trump's achievement. At President Trump's White House Human Trafficking Summit, Attorney General William Barr discussed how the Trump administration took down a child trafficking ring operating within the CPS system in New York.
Emblematic in many ways is one horrific case I was briefed on recently in the Southern District of New York. A very dedicated team of prosecutors doggedly pursued a few little leads and ended up convicting 19 defendants in Manhattan with sex trafficking of minor girls and young women in the New York State child welfare system. In other words, children who society had a special obligation to protect ended up being instead exploited. In this, as in every case, a person who gains leverage or power over a vulnerable victim exploits them for their own gain. There's nothing more predatory or disgusting.
But Washington, D.C. did not want to hear about it. According to our sources, both Kamala Harris's office and Rand Paul convened meetings with parents regarding the CPS issue, but never followed up on the meetings, despite pleas from the parents they ignored. Court records reveal that Kamala Harris represented the state against a mother named Tammy Reif, who reportedly had her son stolen away from her by a Superior Court judge named Gregory W. Pollock. Jonah Reif was allegedly sex trafficked. The Justice Gazette reported on May 9, 2014, in the courtroom of Superior Court Judge Kenneth So, the audience saw testimony of 4-year-old Jonah Reif's description of sex acts performed on him at a preschool in San Diego County. Despite medical and witness corroboration of sexual abuse, Jonah was given to individuals accused of trafficking him and, according to foreign authorities, taken out of the United States by the alleged traffickers. Prior to the exportation of Jonah Reif, aka Sullivan, he reportedly had been forced to endure a significant number of fast-tracking vaccination shots. Such large numbers of vaccination fast-track shots are a typical characteristic of kids being exported into foreign child sex slavery. Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley Biden, worked as a social worker in Washington, D.C.
As the next first daughter, Ashley brings a career of public service, working for years as a social worker and public advocate.
And she also worked for the Delaware Child Services Department. Ashley Biden obtained her 2010 master's degree in social work from UPenn, where her father's think tank is based. The Penn Biden Center is financed by UPenn General Funds. UPenn collects massive amounts of money from coronavirus vaccine sales, thanks to a licensing agreement that UPenn made with Pfizer's partner BioNTech. The deal was made when Joe Biden was officially working for UPenn, and Joe Biden can return to that pile of money in Pennsylvania after his presidency. During the 2020 election, journalist Patrick Halley of National File became the first reporter to publish contents of Ashley Biden's rehab diary, in which Ashley wrote about her relationship with her father.
Ashley Biden took childhood showers with her father, Joe, that she described in her diary as, quote, probably not appropriate. She wrote about her resentment for her father and her years of sexual trauma. Ashley Biden confirmed that the diary is hers. So all these media folks who are trying to shut down this story are really just suppressing the voice of a victim named Ashley Biden. And she's the victim of the Biden family. You have to look at her brother, Hunter Biden, who was literally uploading Pornhub videos of himself onto the internet. And you know what? He sent a porn link over a text message to a phone number identified in his phone as Dad. This is the kind of blackmail material that is on the Biden family, because Jack Maxey, the citizen journalist, has 80,000 images from the Hunter Biden laptop that have never been released in the United States. They basically chased Jack Maxey out of this country. He went to Switzerland and he was being followed by Chinese communist spies. The Chinese communists know what's in those 80,000 images, and they know how it relates to Hunter Biden's niece, Natalie Biden, okay? And they know how it relates to other members of the family. This is a national security crisis, especially now that Joe Biden is selling our oil to the Chi-Coms, and the Chinese are basically taking over our country in many ways, buying the land, buying the farmland, taking over our agriculture. So you have to understand that these people get themselves involved in situations in which they can be blackmailed. And they do that when they're among themselves in their own satanic little corners of the world. For instance, Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, is one of the top guys at Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is a satanic gathering place in Northern California. Alex Jones famously infiltrated it, where they do the cremation of care ceremony to worship Moloch, their deity of child sacrifice. That's what these sick elites do.
Maria Piacesi, the teenage niece of Senator Steve Daines, confirmed that Joe Biden pinched her body in the nipple area, but declined to elaborate further, fearing backlash from some unnamed individuals in her life. Here you see footage of Biden's assault on Maria Piacesi when she was a child. Al Sharpton offered up another sleazy sacrifice to Sleepy Joe at the White House. Jeff Sessions shielded his granddaughter from Sleepy Joe. Chris Coons tried to pretend he didn't notice when Joe Biden was sexually assaulting his daughter during his swearing-in ceremony. Chris Coons even spoke on his daughter's behalf to defend Joe Biden. Chris Coons got confronted about that during his 2020 re-election campaign, and his masked face actually showed just a fleeting flicker of shame. Of course, Chris Coons groveled to Biden with a laughable 2020 video defending his friend Biden's supposed faith. Joe Biden pushes collectivist child raising.
They're not somebody else's children. They're like yours when they're in the classroom.
Joe Kotchett is Nancy Pelosi's best friend. Joe Kotchett is a San Francisco lawyer and a Joe Biden fundraiser. Kotchett is the man who is personally choosing the judges for the Joe Biden administration. On May 23, 2007, San Francisco Weekly reported this information on Joe Kotchett, who was engaged in a bitter divorce from his wife.
In her March 28 sworn declaration, she accused Kotchett of being a name-calling tyrant, one who would push his kids' faces into their plates or pull them away from the table by their hair when they didn't finish their meals. She also described him as a foul-mouthed heavy drinker who averaged 1 bottle of wine each evening and drove around with a plastic glass of wine, sometimes when the girls were in the car with him. She claimed her hubby liked to walk around the house naked, even as the couple's 2 daughters grew older and became uncomfortable with his nudity. When she asked him to stop, he allegedly screamed he would do whatever he fucking well pleased, according to her court declaration.
Karina Feng is a victim of the Pelosi crime family. As the Taiwanese-American daughter of a legendary healing spa owner in San Francisco, Karina was targeted by Paul Pelosi Jr., Nancy's son. Paul Pelosi Jr. falsely got Karina's children taken away as part of an intimidation campaign to get possession of Karina's property, which has become a drug den under the documented supervision of Paul Pelosi Jr.
Okay, well, the story started when I was delivering my 4th child in a hospital in Santa Clara County. And then when I was supposed to get discharged, the head physician did not allow it. And suddenly I got a call from my home that the hospital sent people to my home and raided my home while I was delivering the baby. And then their reason was because they said if I wasn't home, that means I'm not a fit mother to take care of the older children at home. I'm not supposed to be delivering the child in the hospital. So it kind of became a reason for taking my children, which doesn't really make much sense to the normal prudent person, because how are you going to have a baby, deliver a baby without going to the hospital and then having the rest of your family at home and some family together during the process? It's impossible to be at home and in the hospital at the same time. So based on that, they want to take my kids, and they took my kids, and then we went to court, and the appointed attorneys told me to shut up, or they will do everything and anything they want to your kids. Actually went on to the CPS paper. So it says, on the same day I put in the lawsuit, Karina must be nuts because she thinks that she knows somebody and wants to have a kid with Mr. Pelosi. And so, yeah, I mean, I love him and he loves me. So what, right? But why is it a big deal? Why is it a big deal? We know each other for 23 years. Is that a big deal? Anyways, and then these people are like, oh no, you know Pelosi. That means you made it up. It's impossible if you know Pelosi. The Pelosi family are like the mother and the father of this country, right? So how is it possible that people cannot know them? Right? And I'm living in San Francisco since 1979. How is it possible that I won't have a chance to know them? Yeah, they're public people. Everybody can know them. Is knowing them equal taking my kids? Just because I know them is a fault? Then who wants to know them anymore? Nobody on this earth wants to know or have anything to do with them if knowing them equals taking their kids, right? So basically, I'm not worried about what I did, about putting in a lawsuit. But when you put in a lawsuit, when you're treated like that, and then at the same day, another complaint goes into the social worker's office, telling the social workers, instructing them to destroy your family because of something that you didn't do wrong, then there's a big problem right there. We just need to reform that a little bit, and everything will be a lot better.
So, because you
made sure I was okay and took me to the doctor. And so I was able to heal up. And after that, when I saw my kids close to Christmas, but they didn't let me see my kids as agreed, but in a different agreement at the last minute. But I did end up seeing my kids, and then my daughter, my second daughter, she said, "Mom, did you cry a lot? Because your eyes looked so different from last time." And I said, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then, because I don't want them to worry. Okay, so I don't want them to feel or see me in pain. I just want them to see the happy part of me. And that's it. I don't want anybody to see me suffering or me in pain or me in any type of mode that I don't want them to worry about me kind of thing. I don't want them to see it. So I just try to smile it off, laugh it off, but I couldn't hide it from Katie. I couldn't hide it from her. She's so smart. And she's like, "Mom, I know you've been crying." I said, "I have not. Just don't say anything. We're under supervision. They're going to write us down, turn us into court and say we're nuts because we were crying because we miss each other. And we're not supposed to cry. If we cry, they're going to cancel our visit. So we can't cry. Hold it in." Then Katie said, "Mom, just remember, if you break your eyes, you won't be able to see me again." So
The initiation ceremony for Skull and Bones, the secretive fraternity at Yale University that has produced scores of political leaders, including George W. Bush and John Kerry, reveals the Satanism of the globalist elites. In rare footage of an initiation ceremony, Skull and Bones cult members scream, "The devil equals death."
He's come pretty close. She was part of a team that successfully recorded part of the initiation ceremony that takes place in the tomb's courtyard.
Okay, you have the doorway here.
Yeah.
Okay, then to the right you have a hedge, and then
Yeah.
you have an evergreen tree. If you follow that line straight back, courtyard's in there.
Ah, okay.
So
that's where they have the ceremonies in
the outdoor part of it. Part of it was indoors. So we only got to see the outdoor part.
Right.
We only got to, and to listen to the outdoor part. God only knows what went on indoors.
And what did you hear? What was it you know? You managed to get this unique
It was
access to it.
disgusting. It was gross. I mean, they were pretending to murder people.
What was the tone of it, though? Was it jokey or was it
Vicious.
quite...
No, it wasn't jokey at all. It was sick. It's about the only way I can describe it. It was sick.
What you're hearing is the first recording ever made of the Skull and Bones initiation ceremony. It has never been broadcast before. 15 new members of the club are being introduced into the macabre rituals of Skull and Bones by the senior students who are about to graduate. The club has what some might see as a strange fascination with death, skulls and bones. There's the chants too, difficult to hear first of all, but including "the devil equals death, death equals death."
Paul Bonacci is a victim of childhood sex trafficking. Now, Paul Bonacci claims that in 1984, he took part in an orgy at Bohemian Grove that turned into a snuff film in which a child was murdered as part of a satanic ritual, evidently. Now, Paul Bonacci, who was part of the Franklin cover-up, the Franklin scandal of the 1980s, and you can go look at that Washington Times article from 1989 about the call boys allegedly taking a late-night tour of the White House and this child prostitution network ensnaring VIPs with Reagan and Bush, right? So Paul Bonacci was actually awarded by a court of law $1 million for everything that he went through as a child trafficking victim. So we have to ask ourselves, when he's talking about Bohemian Grove, what is really going on with Nancy Pelosi's husband and all of his friends over there at Bohemian Grove?
Exactly. Now, if I were to make a movie about who would you want to play you, Mr. President?
I don't know. I would trust your judgment more than mine on that.
Harvey, why'd you hire Black Q?
For days like this.
fair to say Black Cube operated like a military operation?
It is fair to say that. I think that the way the Black Cube is set up, it mirrors the experiences that the
in your
founders
views
had in
about
Israeli intelligence.
Epstein working for the Mossad, what intelligence agency would trust Jeffrey Epstein?
It was also widely reported that Bill had a friendship or business or some kind of contact with Jeffrey Epstein.
Used his mansion in Palm Beach for sexual escapades with girls under 18.
It's not one thing, it was many things that I did not like.
The fact that Epstein was allowed to travel to Israel reflects his vast business interests around the world. But allowing someone soon to be imprisoned on felony charges to leave the country is highly irregular.
He was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone.
Nothing to say. 2 people dead inside of your apartment, just looking to give you a chance to respond. Do you find that to be a coincidence, sir?
How about President Clinton?
No.
You hesitated.
Heather Hobbs is a pro-life advocate in the state of Oregon who took on CPS publicly and won. Heather Hobbs' story is an inspiration to parents around the world who are searching for light at the end of this very dark tunnel.
I spoke at an Oregon Trump rally, and that ended up getting me put on Twitter and the dark web, and having my name as an Oregon activist as somebody basically just to pick on, and nothing really came out of it, as you know. But we did have an actual issue while I was in the hospital, and I thank God every day that I was in the hospital because all of their allegations had luckily been dismissible because I was in the hospital. However, we did also have a nurse that was verified later by some of my friends who are, involved in police work and investigative work, who has been confirmed to be at Antifa riots, BLM riots. And so this particular nurse was my nurse, and she also called on me. Now, I'm really grateful because there's a lot of hope within the story. And that hope is, A, you get a lawyer immediately. You don't talk to them, you don't cooperate with them, you don't work with them. Unfortunately, what I've seen happen so many times with CPS cases is they'll say, it's no big deal, we're just going to check some stuff out, and then you'll agree to something. I've had people I know that it's, dad just has to go stay with grandparents for the night while we check some things out. What that does is it's essentially an admission of guilt, and you're now submitted into the system, at least in the state of Oregon. So I luckily knew not to do that. And I luckily also had my doctors and everybody immediately from that first moment. I was getting paperwork, writing down names, times, dates. But the average person doesn't know to do that. The average person doesn't know that you can't trust the system.
So to
the
be
average
clear,
person believes. Go ahead.
No, so you were in the hospital and the nurse overheard you saying that you were pro-life and you were listening to a conservative podcast, right? And you think that that is what triggered this nurse to say that there was something wrong with you breastfeeding?
Yes. My daughter was in there. We were having a discussion and her entire demeanor changed. She went from being very pleasant, nice, to very snarky. And in fact, she requested to be switched to a different patient. So I did get a different nurse.
But she called CPS on you.
Yes. Actually met with the CPS people. And I had my kids dressed, cute and matching, typical church outfits, had them with books and crayons. And we walked in there and he goes, here they are, you can see them. And she just had this kind of look of, all right, now how am I going to trick them? And that's where you got to watch out. There's so many elements of attack because, there also was the anonymous calls and you can't find out who's calling anonymously. They had them on Twitter, and they also had, I think you saw the little memes of Join Antifa was the Twitter handle, and it was a Portland-based one, and they were sending stuff with myself, politicians, just people in general that were trying to do better. So I had all of those things that my lawyer had to deal with, and they were trying to poke at every single one if they could, and the lawyer just kept saying, the kids are fine, you can see them, and he got them to admit that they believed that this was politically motivated. And so because the supervising worker stated that to the lawyer, he closed his book and he's like, okay, we're done here. If you bother my client again, we're going to sue you for harassment. And you have to have someone aggressive like that. That's your kids. That's your whole life right there. And they are a trafficking system. Unfortunately, they make so much money off of taking kids away.
So you would say that it is always a mistake to allow them into your house because they don't have authority without a warrant to go in. I mean, we've seen examples where they bring the cops too, and a lot of people just get intimidated. So what is the best strategy if you hear a knock at the door? Because you've succeeded. I mean, you've beaten these people.
Well, here's the thing. You need to know your constitutional rights. The federal government, and then the state government, and then the local sheriff, that is the line of authority that you need to know. A lot of people, if the feds showed up to their house, they would just comply. You don't have to. If that sheriff isn't there with a warrant, you don't need to let them into your house. They might forcibly enter anyways. And it's the same thing with the kids and everything else with CPS. They will try to use that authority to intimidate you. But if they don't have warrants, and you actually have to look at it, make sure it is, in fact, a warrant, make sure you still call that lawyer immediately. But you do not comply and let them into your house because they are there to pick it apart. They will use your fear against you. Nobody can fathom the thought of losing their children. And if there's an easy way to fix this problem, that's what they want to do. That's the natural instinct. But I promise you, going through the process of actually standing up for your rights, don't talk to them, get your lawyer. Your kids are worth it. There are organizations out there that you can look up online that will help you with legal fees. Do not work with them. I am not saying that every social worker is a bad person. I'm saying that it's a bad system, and a lot of these young, naive people go into it thinking, oh, I'm helping save the kids. And a lot of times the ones that stay, they end up getting corrupted and the other ones end up leaving. I can't tell you how many of our social workers just got transferred out of the county or ended up quitting because they couldn't stand what they were seeing.
You know, it's really, it cuts across all lines. I've met white people, black people, all poor people, because they just take the kids from poor people. The poor people never see the kids again. If it's a rich parent, they want to bring them back for visitation over and over again to drain their bank account, right?
Yes, I've seen that too. There were many people that I would consider of wealth who continually, it's going to be another year. It's going to be another year. They'll put them up for adoption and then, no, I'm going to give you chances. So the system is not in your favor. Well, the biggest thing is making sure you always have enough money saved to be able to hire yourself a lawyer. In today's world, anybody can do anything to you just because they don't like your political views, unfortunately. So if you have a neighbor that doesn't like that you're a Trump supporter, or perhaps doesn't like that you volunteer at the local school board and they don't like what you're saying, they are calling. So you need to have that money saved up to have your own personal lawyer. I wouldn't recommend the state lawyers.
Did you have another recent experience with CPS in the hospital?
Not with CPS specifically. I recently had another baby, and forgive me, it's so hot in here. I recently had another baby, and because I wouldn't wear a mask and I told them about the vaccine stuff, they were keeping my baby from me, even though I had the doctor clearing me and everything else. So I spent 3 days not being able to be with my newborn. And I called a lawyer, called patient advocate Representative Mark Fincham from Arizona, who's running for Secretary of State. He flew in to be at the hospital with me. I had our Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association State Director, Kirk Lanius, come in with me for the state of Texas. And they were there with me along with my lawyer friends calling. Luckily, I tell people the average person is not going to be as connected as I am to where they can make these calls and say my rights are being violated. You need to know who are my sheriffs, who are my state reps, where do they stand on these issues? So that way you can call them too and put that extra pressure on top of that lawyer, because my issue recently fell on a weekend. And as you know, getting anything done on a weekend is ridiculous. You just can't do it. And anytime there's the potential of CPS, and with my prior experiences, I was fearful. Are they going to, make the argument that I'm not being safe to my baby because I won't wear a mask? Are they going to make the argument that if I don't vaccinate him with whatever, that I'm somehow hurting him? And those were my fears. So luckily, because I called the patient advocate immediately, I kept bugging the doctors. I continued to bring in friends and have people calling the hospital. By Monday, they were working with me and I could see my baby suddenly. Suddenly, I wasn't a threat anymore. But they did bring in a social worker.
Oh.
And so, of course, I said, I'm not willing to talk to you. And that's where you guys have to go with this. You can't be willing to talk with them. I'm not going to sign anything or talk with you at all.
Yep. Well, Heather, I really appreciate your time. And I think that you can inspire a lot of people because you've had a couple of successes now in which you just say, I'm not taking this. I'll get Mark Fincham here. I'll get, anybody I need to get here to protect these babies. And
Well,
so
get your pastor, get friends from church, if you have, having a good community is really important.
Well, I just want to remind the world that I am putting together a class action through my family rights organization. So anyone who has suffered this kind of life that they could have had a better life, a regular life, a thriving life for themselves, their loved ones, their families, and their future. If you're suffering from this and your future is gone, or pretty much you think it's gone, get me your documents, okay? Write up to 5-page summary, submit it to me. You can go on to familyright.org, or you can just write me something. Say hi, whatever that you like, and we can establish a relationship, and then we can join forces, and perhaps you have something important you want to share with me, and you can see what I've done. The stuff on that page are all the information on my initiative, but we can add to it. So we're not working on that right now. That's something I've done, and you can see that as a reference of my thought pattern. But what I've been doing was I submitted another bill into Congress. It's called Initiative 485. It's already passed. Bill HR 485 already passed the House, and then next year is going into the Senate, and that has gotten, I think it was 82% yays from the House and 90% yays from community polls. So we're expecting that to be a great victory, and it has been extremely edited, but that's not something I can control. So I do what I can on my part, and hopefully you'll do yours.
After having continuously lost in court, and with your attempts to regain custody, you met on the steps of the courthouses,
yes,
protesters.
Oh yeah,
and
a lot.
joined with these protesters against Child Protective Services. You found that you were not alone, and now you've organized how many?
35,000 members.
35,000 members. 35,000 in America, nationwide.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
that's nothing.
It's just a fragment of the people who've been affected by it.
If you look it up, CPS, just look it up on Google. Child predatory services.
Yes.
What protective? Protect what? Protect their own pockets?
That's right.